Welcome back. This is You've Heard It Said, where faith meets history and the stories we thought we knew come alive. I'm Brie Rosalie, and this is part 3 of our 4-part Christmas series. In part 1, we asked why Christmas isn't in the Bible. In part 2, we looked at how Christmas was canceled, outlawed, and nearly lost, and how Charles Dickens helped bring it back. So let's get into it this week with The Unexpected Architect of Modern Christmas, the surprising story behind why most of Christmas looks German. If you walk around any American town in December, signs of Christmas are inescapable. Every town center and shopping mall has a Christmas tree or at least a respectable display of garland. And then consider the Christmassy traditions we don like gay apparel every December. The gift giving, the stockings, the baked goods and mulled wine, the Christmas markets, all the Advent things, the calendars, wreaths, candles, and otherwise. And of course, St. Nicholas. Now, much of it didn't come from Bethlehem or Rome or the early church. So much of Christmas we know today is German. Not exclusively, of course. Christmas is global, layered, and shaped by thousands of years of tradition. You're probably picking up on a pattern at this point. Constantine didn't invent Christmas, and neither did Dickens, and Germany can't take full credit either, though we'll discuss it at length. This is the story of how a patchwork of German folk customs, Christian rituals, immigrant traditions, and winter folklore quietly became the blueprint for the Christmas many of us celebrate today, and how God once again used messy human history to carry forward a story of hope. And at the center of that story is our main character this week, St. Nicholas. Before Santa was the iconic rosy-cheeked belly like a bowl full of jelly cookie addict brand that he is today, he was a bishop. Nicholas of Myra was likely born in Patara, Lycia, in what is now present-day Demre, Turkey, around 280 AD. According to early accounts, he gave away his inherited wealth and spent his life caring for the poor, the sick, sailors, and most memorably, children. One of the most enduring stories told about him tells of how Nicholas secretly provided dowries for 3 sisters who otherwise would have been sold into slavery or forced into prostitution. He gave anonymously under the cover of night, asking for no recognition. Footnote: this is where the whole anonymous gift-giving thing starts. Also, yes, this story does an incredible amount of heavy lifting for Western Christmas theology. End footnote. That story mattered for what Christmas would eventually become. It tied generosity to justice and gift-giving to humility. By the Middle Ages, St. Nicholas had become one of the most beloved figures in Europe. His feast day, December 6th, was associated with generosity and good fortune, especially for children. Footnote: German traditions often paired him with a companion. You may be familiar with Krampus or Knecht Ruprecht. Regional variations abound. End footnote. And even after the Protestant Reformation, when many saints fell out of favor, Nicholas endured, particularly in German-speaking regions and in the Netherlands. But St. Nicholas didn't appear in a vacuum. He stepped into a world that already knew winter very well. Now, before we get into the Yule of it all, over time, more details attached themselves to Nicholas's story. The chimney, associated with the hearth or the center of the home, offered a way to explain anonymous nighttime generosity. St. Nicholas's dowry story, coins tossed secretly, likely inspired the idea of gifts appearing from above, so the chimney seemed the most natural fit. And most homes had them. Reindeer were associated with early Scandinavian lore, but they were made more mainstream in the 19th century through Clement Clarke Moore's 1822 poem, An Account of a Visit from St. Nicholas. These flying reindeer pulling a sleigh gave Nicholas both a way to travel through the winter sky, and they fed the Romantic era fascination with northern Arctic animals. Cookies and milk grew out of a hospitality tradition, small offering left for a generous visitor. And last but certainly not least, elves. Though elves came from Nordic and Germanic folklore, our Christmas amplifiers, the Victorian writers, loved these small, industrious, magical helpers. And so St. Nicholas drifted away from beloved bishop and into more modern Santa territory. Now, none of these fun traditions that cropped up were theological necessities. They were cultural layers, added slowly, playfully, and imaginatively. This was the part of the story where things start to get crowded and historians need to get out more metaphorical thread to connect all the dots. But they're only going to get more crowded because Yes, it's finally time to talk about Yule. Long before Christianity reached Northern Europe, Norse cultures, and later broader Germanic societies influenced by them, marked midwinter with Yule, a season of communal feasting and toasting the pantheon of northern gods. It was centered on survival, fire, and the hope that the light would return. Now, this was not a cute aesthetic. This was about getting through winter alive. Homes were lit by massive hearth fires, fueled by the Yule log, a single heavy log brought inside and burned slowly over days or even weeks. The fire was meant to protect the household and push back whatever darkness might be lurking beyond the walls. Footnote: if you've ever watched a Yule log video on YouTube for ambiance, congratulations, you are participating in an ancient survival ritual. End footnote. Evergreen branches were brought indoors as symbols of life that refused to die. Candles burned not for the mood, but for meaning. But Yule wasn't just about warmth. It was also a bit ominous. Across North and Germanic mythology, midwinter was associated with Odin and the wild hunt, a ghostly procession said to race across the winter sky. Odin, known by different names across regions, wasn't a gift giver. He was a god of war, death, and judgment. People didn't wait up for him. They hid. Doors were closed, offerings were left out, children were warned not to wander. Winter wasn't romantic. It was powerful, unpredictable, and a little terrifying. And underneath it all was the same question humanity is always asked in the dark. Will the light come back? When Christianity arrived in German-speaking regions, it didn't mock that fear. It answered it. Instead of a God racing through the sky in judgment, Christianity proclaimed a God who entered the darkness quietly, not in a fire, not in spectacle, but as a child, not to demand offerings, but to become one. This is why German Christmas traditions didn't erase Yule. They reframed it. Fire became light, fear became waiting, judgment became incarnation, and that framing is why it lasted. Here's where the story comes full circle. German culture didn't eliminate the idea of a powerful winter visitor, it transformed him. Where Odin once passed overhead in fear, St. Nicholas arrived with gifts. Where the wild hunt inspired dread, Nicholas inspired generosity. And in Protestant regions shaped by Martin Luther, a new figure emerged, the Christkind, or Christkindl, literally the Christ child. Luther, wary of excessive focus on saints, didn't want to eliminate the gift-giving. He just wanted to recenter it. So instead of children waiting up for St. Nicholas, they were taught to associate gifts with Christ himself, the ultimate gift given to the world. The Christkind wasn't a saint or a magician. It was a theological idea made visible. Christmas gifts as a response to Emmanuel, not a reward for good behavior. In some regions, the Christkind replaced Nicholas entirely. In others, the two existed side by side. Either way, the message was clear. The heart of the season wasn't the visitor, it was the gift. As German immigrants carried these traditions to America, Christkind became Christkringle, and when the Dutch settlers brought their version, Sinterklaas, to New York in the late 1700s, St. Nicholas entered American culture and slowly morphed into Santa Claus, and early promoters helped popularize his image. By the mid-1800s, department stores began using Santa to draw families into shops. In 1841, a Philadelphia store debuted a life-size Santa. In the 1890s, the Salvation Army dressed up unemployed men as Santa to raise money for Christmas meals, embedding generosity, charity, and commerce into the same figure. German tradition didn't fight Santa, it fed Santa. Footnote: metaphorically speaking, but also milk and cookies probably. End footnote. Now that we have Santa ironed out, what about the other beloved Christmas traditions to round out our German aesthetic? Let's start with Advent. Advent didn't begin with wreaths or candles. It began as a season on the Christian calendar, a period devoted to waiting for Christ. The word Advent comes from Latin adventus, meaning arrival, and in the ancient world, it was used for the arrival of a king. Early Christians adopted intentionally. Christ has come, Christ will come again, and we live in that tension between those two truths. So when you light an Advent candle or use a calendar or hang an Advent wreath, you're participating in a distinctly German Christian practice. It was created in 1839 by Johann Heinrich Weikern, a German Lutheran pastor who wanted a way for children to mark the weeks leading up to Christmas. The original wreath had 24 candles, one for each day, but over time it became 4 candles representing 4 Sundays with themes like hope, love, joy, and peace. And the Advent calendar, also German of course, and credited to a Gerhard Lang in Munich in about 1903. It was born as chalk marks on doors and slowly transforming into the paper, chocolate, beer around the world, dog treats, you name it in 24 days of tiny gifts versions we use today. You see clearly how an anticipatory season like Advent naturally fosters a way to mark that waiting. But Germany didn't invent that anticipation, but it did invent the Advent aesthetic. And here's another fun Christmas tradition: Christkindl markets, Germany's gift to the world. If you ever wandered through a Christmas market with warm spiced wine, Glühwein, carved toys, candles, or music, you're experiencing a tradition that began in Germany and Austria. And the oldest documented market? Dresden, 1434. Markets spread quickly through German-speaking towns, offering community, food, craft goods, and celebration during the darkest part of the year. Today, you can find Christkindl markets in Chicago, Denver, New York, Vancouver, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and dozens of other cities, each one an echo of that centuries-old German winter pastime. German food traditions are everywhere at Christmas time. Gingerbread, or Lebkuchen, marzipan, Stollen, spice cookies, and nutcrackers, the tool, not the ballet. Much of the warm and cozy cinnamon and spice flavor palette we associate with Christmas, you guessed it, it's German. Okay, here's the big one. If you want to know why nearly 100 million homes put a tree in their living room each December, the answer is simple: Germany. The earliest documented Christmas trees, fir trees, or Tannenbaum specifically, showed up in 16th century German towns. They decorated their evergreen trees with fruit, nuts, wafers, and candles. Long before twinkling LED and coordinated color palettes, Christmas trees were lit with real candles. Yes, actual flames on a dead tree. Candles were clipped in branches or melted into place with wax. Footnote: because fire hazards build character and insurance was not a thing yet. End footnote. While evergreens have long been used in midwinter traditions, symbolizing life in the dead of winter, the addition of candles in German Christian homes reflected a theological shift. Life in winter now illuminated by Christ. And perhaps this German Christian tradition would have stayed regional, but then came the moment that transformed the world. When Prince Albert, a German royal, married Queen Victoria, he brought his Christmas traditions with him to Windsor. In 1848, the Illustrated London News published an image of the royal family gathered around a lit Christmas tree, and suddenly all of Victorian England wanted one. From there, Victorian culture exported Christmas around the globe, including to America. In a single generation, Germany's evergreen tradition became the centerpiece of Christmas worldwide. So how did German Christmas become the American Christmas we recognize today? By the 1800s, waves of German immigrants were arriving in the United States, bringing with them Christmas trees, advent calendars, Christmas markets, gift-giving customs, carols, cookies, and a deep love of winter warmth and ritual. Americans quickly folded these traditions into a growing holiday identity. Then came Dickens' A Christmas Carol, imported from England, see last week's episode. Then came the department stores. Then came Santa's commercialization. But under it all, the backbone, the bones, the aesthetic, it's German. German influence lasted because it did 3 things exceptionally well. 1, it honored human longing instead of dismissing it. 2, it made theology visible through trees, candles, and calendars. 3, it centered on generosity, not indulgence. German Christians didn't dissolve the winter lore of yesteryear, they redeemed it. As you've hopefully seen over the last few episodes, the story of Christmas isn't a straight line. It's a tapestry, and woven through it all is the German tradition of finding light in the darkest part of the year, of embracing warmth, generosity, community, and hope. Not because everything was perfect, Not because history is simple. I'm sure this piece proves otherwise, but don't worry, there won't be a quiz. But God has always worked through ordinary people, imperfect customs, and surprising cultural moments to reveal himself. A reminder that Christmas and all the traditions it absorbed and adapted weren't about conquering winter, but about enduring it with hope. Because every December we feel it again. The waiting, the ache, the longing for warmth, connection, and meaning. And whether we realize it or not, through culture, folklore, and tradition, then and now, we're still reaching for the same answer. Emmanuel, God with us. Thanks for listening to episode 3 of my Christmas series on You've Heard It Said. Up next, we're closing out the series with how Christmas became big business, when a sacred season turned into a cultural industry, and what we lost and gained along the way. Make sure you follow the show so you don't miss episode 4, and check out the show notes if you want the written version over on Substack. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.